have an opportunity for diplomacy. The Gueran Shah are keen to take the world, but their efforts seem feeble and misguided. If we could contact their warlord and redirect their aggression to our foes, we may be able to gain ourselves an ally.
You mistake their scouting party for a full assault. They are not trying to win yet. They are testing our defenses.
All the more reason why we should negotiate with them rather than call them bluff.
They're bluff. You hear what they say in battle? Of course you don't. You stay locked away in a bunker while the rest of us do the fighting. You call their tactics a bluff. They mock us. They tell us to fight them, to counter them, but it is a trap. Foolhardiness will get us killed. Diplomacy will get us killed. None of these options will save us.
I urge you to reconsider Shaso. Beating them in battle will only get more of our men killed.
When will the lesson be learned? Did they not teach you this during your courses back on the homeworld? You cannot reason with a monster when your head is in its mouth!
I'm going to be honest, this is a video that I wanted to do the least, but it's the faction that I know the most about when it comes to factions I have left to talk about. When it comes to Xenos, the entire point of them is that they're not supposed to resemble any other faction in 40k. Imperium has a similar vibe between one another. Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines are pretty much the same as each other, minus spikes. Chaos Demons is where it kind of gets a little bit weird, but there's still a design philosophy that matches everything all together, at least when it comes to like the mono god demons. But for Xenos, Leagues of Votann, Necrons, Eldar, both dark and normal, and just all of them, they don't have a similar vibe to one another. Orcs literally don't resemble anything else in the game. They barely resemble each other enough as it is. But while they don't look similar to anything, they have a very familiar feeling. In sci-fi settings, most of the time there is an advanced civilization that has achieved a lot in the advancements of technology, medicine, science, so on and so forth. The Galactic Republic in Star Wars, the Federation in Star Trek, SecCom in Lancer, technically speaking, and a lot of different factions in Battletech. All of these have an advanced feeling to them. And in Warhammer 40,000, the Tau Empire has such a feeling to it. Compare a Tau Fire Warrior to the average Imperial Guardsman. The difference between them looks insane. Almost like the Tau were never meant to be in 40k, and in some ways that's the truth. In some ways people wish they weren't in the game, but I am not one of those people. I think the Tau are cool. I think they get hated on because 40k perpetuates meme culture, and most of all, this is another faction that Games Workshop ended up fucking over. So who are the Tau? Where did they come from? And why does GW ruin everything that it touches? Let's get right into that because hello, I am Diadium, the man in the broken tower, standing by for Titanfall as I blame both Respawn and the community for the franchise dying. Before we get into the video, memberships are open, you get access to the Discord, chosen or higher, you get your name on the model, and if you stay for a year, you get kit bashed into my army at your discretion. Alright, let's talk about the mechanized cow people. So how did the Tau start? Oddly enough, the Tau were discovered not too long ago, at least not long ago in comparison to how old humanity is. The Tau, before the Roman Empire, were discovered by a Mechanicus Explorator fleet, and the Tau were in a very like caveman era of technology. They weren't really doing much, they just discovered fire and simple tools and were just like beating each other up with rocks. So before the Imperium ended up cleansing the planet, a giant warp storm appeared and cut them off from the entire system, after which the Age of Apostasy ended up happening, you know, the whole stuff with like Goj Van Dyer. So the Mechanicus ended up just leaving, and the knowledge of the Tau got lost in Imperial records, as it does. 5,000 years go by, and these guys now have railguns. In terms of advancements of technology, the Tau pretty much sped ran the tech tree compared to humans, and there's a reason for that. According to Tau history and or mythos, nobody really knows. I don't know if it's even true anymore. The four nations of fire, earth, water, and air were brought into harmony due to the Avatar, I mean the Ethereals. Pretty much all four nations and or cultures or castes, as they would be known later, were warring with each other, and progress never really came around due to that fact. I think at this point there was it was like early gunpowder era, like feudal Japan or just like feudalism in general. Then a strange light appeared in the sky and everybody thought it was going to be the end of days, but no, it was merely the coming of the Ethereals, a strange species of Tau that began brokering peace between all the warring factions. And for some reason, it was working. A species preconditioned to war for a few thousand years, they were just listening to these guys. And guess what? Listening to the Ethereals led to a lot of prosperity. Their technology advanced rather quickly, and like I said, compared to humans, it's stupidly fast. Humans are around 300,000 years old if we're counting like really old Homo sapiens and just like fossils that we found. Taking that previous time, and I don't know if it's including our current era, but let's go ahead and say, for the sake of time, in 302,000 years, all we have to show for our technological advancements are ChatGPT, NFTs, and cartoonishly evil politicians. The Tau have fucking titans. The Ethereals managed to get everybody to set aside their differences for a concept known as the greater good. But what is the greater good? A lot of people say the greater good is communism. These people have brain damage, mostly because one of the things the Tau share a lot of similarities with is Imperial Japan more than they share with Communist China. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was a movement in the 1900s for Japan called the Greater Good, mostly during the time of World War II because, you know, the reason for this is because the Greater Good is a very Japanese ideology. Japan is a very collectivist country. Individualism doesn't really matter and they don't really promote it. For them, what matters most is what everybody can achieve by working together. There's problems with both collectivism and individualism. Just like take a look at like Japan and how a bunch of people are super stressed and they don't really like feel in place, and then go ahead and take a look at America and see how many people feel incredibly entitled. But in Japan, a person is willing to make more sacrifices for the sole purpose that it will help everybody else. That's why you see people minding their own business. That's why you also see in Japan, mental health is not really taken seriously, but that's more of a real life thing. We're talking about stupid plastic soldiers. The greater good is a very similar concept. Everybody sets aside their individual desires for the entirety of the Tau Empire being able to prosper. I'm not here to debate whether or not it's a good idea. I really don't care. It's just Tau lore, so just get over it. The greater good is a very important part of Tau lore to the point where it is basically what they preach to other worlds during their spheres of expansion, which in an unglorified way is basically just saying it's a Tau crusade. Tau go out, find worlds, and try to convert them to their ideology in the hopes that more people will join the Tau Empire and thus serve the greater good. Make no mistake, this isn't just the Tau asking you to give up your freedoms for the sake of being a peasant. People are well taken care of in the Tau Empire. People are fed, they're clothed, protected, housed, employed, so on and so forth. Realistically, you would never go hungry, homeless, or die of disease in the Tau Empire. There are benefits to the greater good, and probably the most important thing is, honestly, look at the Imperium. These people will cave your skull in if you have so much as an independent thought. The Tau? They don't really care much. You can have opinions, differing cultures. Hell, they let Imperials who convert keep their religion as long as you serve the greater good. They really don't care that much. They even have a bunch of different races that have joined the Tau Empire. It's not just Tau. So it's all a pretty good deal, right? We'll talk about how GW fucked them up because, god damn it. I feel like every time I talk about a faction, there's inevitably the part of, and Games Workshop ruined it segment. Before we do that, we have to talk about the main casts of the Tau. We talked about the Ethereals and we'll touch on them a little bit more later because they're very, very important to Tau as just like a faction, but there are the water, earth, fire, and air casts. The water cast is the easiest one to talk about, honestly. They're all kind of easy, but like this is the easiest in my opinion. The casts, while all looking different, are still Tau to each other. They just have different evolutionary traits that help them work in better environments. For the water cast, they are very good diplomats, politicians, businessmen, merchants, bankers, so on and so forth. They serve the economic and political needs of the Tau, and they probably get the most fan art drawn of them because blue alien women or something. The Earth cast are engineers, builders, construction workers, roboticists, farmers, and are the largest number of the Tau Empire. They are the worker bees. If you need anything done, you get an Earth cast member to do it for you. They're pretty funny. They have a very like Leagues of Votan feel about them since a majority of their culture is basically just OSHA compliance, and their humor gets a little bit bland and dour because of how their outlook on life is dictated by the quality of their work. Literally just the Hank Hill of Tau or something, I don't know. That Guayla ain't right. The aircasts are my least favorite, but they're also really important. Firstly, back in the olden days, they apparently used to have wings, or at least like lighter membranes. Something air nomads see here, that's not the point. Jokingly, in the Tau Empire, they're referred to as the invisible cast because given their physiology for living in high up mountains, the aircasts are normally pilots or stationed on orbital defenses, so you rarely see them on the planet itself. Lastly is my favorite and the best cast, the fire cast. The fire cast exists for one thing and one thing only: war. They literally, through basically eugenics, bred themselves to be the strongest and fiercest of the Tau. Any weaker ones were abandoned like they're Spartans or something. These guys can get pretty intense sometimes, especially with the fact that I think they still uphold like an old blood brother tradition thing where you like ritualistically cut your hands with your blood brother. Once again, Tau don't care about gender, so yeah, there's some crazy bad bitch alien women, and we'll briefly talk about a few of them later. All in all, that's the basis of the Tau. Now let's talk about how GW messed them up. Concentration camps, mind control, eugenics, secret police, deep state politics. Everything I just said sounds like buzzwords from a Fox News broadcast. Because after the Tau release, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, some neckbeards thought that Tau didn't fit in 40k because her Derma Grim Dark needs to be more grim and dark. And of course, GW listened to these oxygen thieves, or somebody at GW was a self-proclaimed oxygen thief. So instead of having a small faction that didn't hyper-expand like the Imperium and didn't have to use the exact same cruelties to maintain power, GW decided that the Tau are North Koreans squared. Ethereals have mind-controlling pheromones that they use to subject their will over other Tau. The water caste are not only there to feed the propaganda machine, but they keep a very close eye on other Tau and sending dissidents to re-education camps. The Earth caste themselves don't do anything wrong, but they get mistreated horribly by the other castes and are basically slaves. The air caste just look creepy, honestly, and of course, the fire caste enforce the part of the greater good that the Ethereals don't ever mention. There is no rejecting the greater good when you are approached with the offer. It is join or die. Nothing else. The two biggest problems with the Tau are the castes and the greater good. The caste system is incredibly rigid and there is no flexibility with it. If you are born in the Earth caste, you stay in the Earth caste no matter what. You can never become a warrior, you will forever be slaving away in a factory and doing nothing more with your life. If you are a fire warrior, nobody gives a shit about your PTSD, get back in the trench. And then the greater good itself. The greater good asks that individualism be sacrificed for the benefit of everybody else. Everybody but the Ethereals, that is. The Ethereals don't have to abide by the greater good. Why? Because they're in charge and there's nothing you can do about it. So what we had was an interesting faction that didn't rely on the same horrible shit that the Imperium does, and now they just have it all added onto them so that way they can fit in 40k. I'm not a fan of this, and GW knows people aren't a fan of this because they created an entire sub-faction of Tau that gets around this problem, and genuinely it's the closest thing that you get to being able to play good guys in 40k, but we're going to glaze the Farsight enclaves a little bit later. So about the history of the Tau, because there's not really much history to speak of, what have they been doing and like how did they get involved in Warhammer? We have to briefly talk about the Damocles Crusade, and yeah, we're going to talk about the Dreadnought. Damocles Crusade sucks. It just blows for everybody involved, including the reader. The Tau were rapidly expanding, and after 5,000 years from their initial discovery, the Tau and the Imperium butted heads in a war declared in the Damocles Gulf. This is a lot of fighting. There's very little story that ends up happening. I think the Tau tried to recreate a space marine or something at some point, and because this is 40k, all of the actual story got saved for the Horus Heresy, for better or for worse. But there's a few cool things that happened. One is that Cato Sicarius curb stomped an unarmed, heavy quotations, Tau after they asked if his ancestors would be proud of him killing an unarmed combatant. Cato did not fucking hesitate to American history X a filthy alien. Another is just the incompetency of the Imperium failing to take over a planet and ended up having to bitch out because the Tyranid showed up and they had to negotiate a ceasefire with the Tau. During the conflict, the Tau also ended up damaging a dreadnought and opening up. Once scanning the marine inside of the sarcophagus, they realized that it was older than their entire civilization. I really hate that this piece of lore gets memed on because it's honestly a really cool fucking thing that like frames the Tau and just like how utterly unprepared they are to deal with the galaxy. This isn't like me or you walking by an old building that existed before we were born or like a historical site. This is a literal living being that is more than 5,000 years old, looking you in the eye and telling you to kill it before it kills you. But no, haha, funny meme. I fucking hate 40k fans, man. Someone is probably going to ask how the Tau managed to fight off the Imperium. Aside from just the Imperium being dogshit and also blame the writer, Tau weapons are fucking horrifying. I said earlier that they have railguns. That's a thing, but their normal weapons are very similar to Necron tech. A basic Tau rifle is a plasma weapon that once it inflicts a wound, the wound starts to spread and slowly consume the target before they break apart. Said rifle is also able to punch through Terminator armor. Not to mention, you're getting all of this in a modernized weapon that can be fired rapidly and has no chance of exploding on you. A Tau railgun can snipe a Warhound Titan in the head and kill all of its crew inside and probably disrupt the reactor, causing the entire thing to blow up. Tau are at the end of the tech tree. They just need to hit a few more nodes before they basically end up having Necron or Eldar technology. They also don't just have railguns and plasma, they also have a shit ton of missiles, miniguns, and so many fucking drones, Jesus Christ. A quick aside, because I don't know how it works right now, but drones used to actually be models in-game that did stuff, and I watched a Chaos Guardsman get ripped apart by a group of them. It was really sad to watch. A lot of Tau tech can pretty much be summarized as it's much more reliable than the Imperium's, and that also translates into gameplay a lot. Their guns wound Terminators easily, they have more armor penetration than Imperium guns, but this is also its own issue as the fact that the Tau are a shooting army, they virtually have no melee with a few exceptions. The other thing about Tau, which sadly isn't expanded on that much in the tabletop, are their auxiliary units. You've probably heard of Kroot, these weird, I don't know how to describe them. They're very hungry aliens that adapt their genetic code to the traits of whatever creature they end up eating. Tau law, by the way, forbids these guys from eating other Tau, which is very funny. And I do believe they also cannibalize each other very often, and I think it's like a very important cultural thing for them. But Tau have a lot of different species. They have small crab people, sentient fungus, mind-controlling worms, literal lizard men that wear power armor, but these are not represented on the tabletop, sadly. It's just Kroot and Vespid. But I think it would be cool, for instance, if you were a Tau fan and you played them on the tabletop, to go ahead and convert some Tau auxiliaries. For instance, power-armored lizardmen that take place of the battlesuits. And another thing about Tau auxiliaries is that something a little bit funny ended up happening. So ethereals can only influence other Tau. They can't influence their auxiliaries, so the people who end up being in Tau auxiliaries really buy into the idea of the greater good, and they have to, have that trust maintained. So what ends up happening is that you have all these different groups from a bunch of different species believing in one ideology, and it created a minor warp deity known as the Tauva. Whoops. Fuck, I almost forgot to talk about battlesuits. Tau are very Gundam inspired. They have mechs, they have power armor, they have literally titans from Titanfall. They're very much like just mecha enthusiasts in the 41st millennia. And why is that? Well, it's because it fucking works. In terms of the tabletop, most of the suits, dwarf space marines are tougher, stronger, and equipped with far more weapons and far better weapons that the Tau arsenal have to offer. Also, for your consideration, the Ghost Q. Is this not just a straight up Titan? Or the Riptide? The Storm Surge is where we're kind of getting a little bit more ridiculous, and don't get me started on the Taunar. I had somebody ask me one time if I could 3D print them a whole Taunar, and it was just one file with all the bits just spread apart, but because it was one file, I couldn't separate the bits. It was genuinely hell. I never touched that file ever again. Anyways, battlesuits, which is a generic term for all of their mechs. The actual big battlesuits used to be highly customizable, now they're just loadouts with different datasheets, but honestly, I think that makes them more unique, because now you have different units that have their own loadouts and their own rules to help them with said loadouts, but the commanders and battlesuits are still highly customizable from my understanding. Another thing about Taus are the vehicles specifically. People call Tau fish because all their vehicles are aquatic themed. Riptide, Manta, Razor Shark, Piranha, Tiger Shark, so on and so forth. But I don't know if you've ever noticed this, Tau have hooves. Tau are deer. Or cows, I mean, depending on your view of their fan art, I guess. But regardless, the reason why their vehicles are named the way they are is because, you guessed it, it's because of the Imperium. Either the Death Watch or somebody got into contact with the water caste, ended up giving the vehicles designations to aid with target identification. I kind of want to talk about the Tau language, but I'm not really well versed enough to give my thoughts on it. All you need to know is that Tau names are very long and they're very like Native American feeling to them. Your name is your caste, its rank, the name of your homeworld, and any names you achieved in your life through either achievements or battle. So you end up getting a bunch of names like Shadowsun, Farsight, Torchstar, Puretide, Bright Sword, so on and so forth. I think it's really cool that your name changes based on what you've done in your life, and it's also an introduction to people about your accomplishments. It's funny, I'm getting to the end of the script and there's still like 8 more pages for me to read through. So I want to talk about 2 Tau characters in specific, but we're going to end up talking about a lot more. We're going to start with the main characters of the Tau, that being Commander Shadowsun and Commander Farsight. How do I describe Shadowsun as simply as possible? She is the Winter Soldier, a disciple of Puretide, probably the greatest Tau commander in history who fought the Imperium to a standstill during the Damocles Crusade. She is one of very few surviving students that was under him, and the Tau Empire deemed her too important to lose her due to aging, so she is cryogenically frozen and unfrozen when the Empire needs her services, and goddamn does this lady beat ass. Favoring Kao Yun tactics, which in Tau translates to the Patient Hunter, she is a Black Ops ambush predator playing 5D chess against her opponent, having survived multiple attempts on her life from the White Scars, Officio Assassinorum, Death Guard, and the Orcs. She is very hard to kill, very hard to even hit, evasive, and also dual wields melted cannons on her arms, as if there was any more reason to be terrified of alien Bucky Barnes. She is incredibly devoted to the greater good and is almost an unquestioning soldier, minus a few hiccups here and there. Her rival is probably somebody who doesn't need an introduction, but they're getting a fucking introduction. Chasseur Viola Chauve Kais Montier, Commander fucking Farsight. The leader of the Farsight Enclaves, head of the Eight, hero Viola, wielder of the Dawnblade, the Great Traitor, he who renounced the greater good, genuinely the only good guy in 40k. Previously Supreme Commander of the Tau Empire, Farsight was obviously a Firecast warrior, so he went out on a very long deployment, where his ethereal ended up getting killed, and while he was gaining a lot more ground and beating ass, for some reason the Empire was very adamant that Farsight retreat from his victories and get another ethereal assigned to his group. This made Farsight incredibly fucking suspicious, especially given the fact that they've been doing a lot better without an ethereal, and it got theorized that the ethereals might be able to mind control or at least influence other Tau to do their bidding. This and the blatant shitty treatment from the ethereals made Farsight question his loyalty to the Empire, mostly to the ethereals, and eventually refusing to return home due to the headway he made during his fights. Farsight was considered a traitor and then exiled from the Tau Empire. The interesting thing is that Farsight never really rebelled against the Empire. He refused to be manipulated and abused, but it's not like he ever shot at the Tau or tried to start a revolution or anything like that. But they exiled him, and given the fact that he was the supreme commander and loved widely, a lot of people ended up defecting to his side. During his escapades, he ended up finding the Dawnblade, a weapon stored within a temple which has the capacity to kill chaos demons. Unknown to Farsight, each time a life is taken with the blade, the lifespan of this victim is added to his own, functionally making him immortal, and allowing him to survive for more than 300 years. Preferring Mont Ka, or the killing blow, the Tau battle philosophy of taking out the strongest opponents first before cleaning up the rest, which is basically Tau Blitzkrieg. He also doesn't necessarily have bodyguards with him or tries to hide his location constantly. Commander Farsight leads a band of Tau known as the Eight, literally a spaghetti western posse or a Kurosawa band of samurai. It is probably the coolest fucking thing about the Tau, and you can technically run them in game. So let's just go ahead and go through the members of the Eight because some of this shit's just fucking fantastic. Commander Bravestorm has the Onager Gauntlet, which is basically a Tau power fist that can donkey punch a space marine into the mantle of the planet. His battlesuit basically acts as dreadnought armor because on several occasions he has tried to sacrifice his own life. How, you ask? Oh, you know, by body blocking a bullet from a Vindicare assassin aiming for Farsight, taking on an Orc horde by himself, or supermanning himself through a Tyranid Bio-Titan. Somehow, he's still alive. Or not. We don't know, but there's somebody called Bravestorm still running around and punching holes through the planets because he's a goddamn shonen protagonist. Stone Dragon actually wasn't a fire warrior, but in fact was an Earthcast engineer that willingly joined Farsight in exile, and also, Stone Dragon ended up developing a virus that was able to kill Tyranids long enough to halt an invasion, because of course he did. He now runs around in a super modified version of a Riptide suit, and I believe he is the biggest member of the group in terms of the mech, I mean. Earthcast are all short kings, and that's why we love them. Commander Brightsword was and is a student of Commander Farsight, and notice I said past and present tense. The first Commander Brightsword was a veteran that served Farsight, later recalled by the Tau Ethereals due to his brutal way of warfare, and instead of getting re-educated, or perhaps this is the re-education, ended up getting assassinated in a joint effort created by an Imperial Penal Legion and the Watercast that feared his aggression might end up turning on them by causing an unnecessary war against the Imperium. The thing is that Brightsword is still around, but why is that? That's because they cloned him. Well, Stone Dragon cloned him, but let's be real. If you have a commander who beats as much ass as Farsight and doesn't even need the Demon Sword, I would probably clone him too. The funny thing about Brightstorm is that he's died so many times that it's just labeled as he has had several deaths. So they can't even count it or put a label on it. They just said, bro dies a lot. But it also works out really well because it ends up feeding the Tau propaganda machine, which, yeah, sure, it's propaganda's bad, but it helps the Farsight Enclaves a lot. Because to the Farsight Enclaves, it's framed that a Tau volunteers to take on the mantle of Brightsword, which is probably the most dangerous job in the Eight. It's kind of more like a Donald from Invincible. This guy has died so many times, but I also do believe that Brightsword maintains his memories of his death. So every single time he faces death, he doesn't back down because he knows he's helping somebody and they'll just bring it back so he can do it all over again. Brightsword is probably like the closest we have to somebody following the greater good. Shadowsun doesn't get a crazy name, but instead he probably has the best piece of technology lodged into his skull, the Puretide Engram chip, a biochip that carries the memories of the great commander Puretide, with the only weakness being that it is vulnerable to Imperial Psychers, along with something else, but we'll get to that. Back then, the Tau Empire put a bunch of Puretide Engram chips in a bunch of Tau commanders, and once they realized that there was a weakness, they decided to remove them by basically lobotomizing all the commanders, and decided to hide all of these lobotomized commanders from the public eye and just said like, oh, they retired or something. Shadowsun has the one and only remaining Puretide Engram chip, and it's starting to degrade, but interestingly enough, because of how the chip works, in moments where Shadowsun is mentally weak, Puretide himself takes over and locks in. It's a lot like the relic from Cyberpunk 2077, to the point where I'm starting to suspect that the chip itself isn't actually degrading. It might have been in Shadowsun for so long that Puretide might just unknowingly be taking over his body. That being said, Shadowsun apparently has balls made of adamantium or something because he's literally able to wrestle control back from Puretide when he needs to. Oblatai, aside from having just a really cool name to say, is a full-on AI engram piloting a battlesuit that has had to be rebuilt over and over and over again. And best of all, he's in the broadside, meaning he's either saturating an entire area with so many missiles you'd think that, I'm not making that joke actually now that I think about it, also because he's a broadside, he carries around a railgun. And the dude is just Rusty from Armored Core because he's sniping Tyranids from across the map. And by Tyranids, I mean a Hive Tyrant. You've all played Decapitation, you know how big these things are. Commander Arakan is apparently just physically built different, to the point where his physique intimidates other Tau. Commander GigaChad here also gets Winter Soldier like Shadowsun, and for a brief time when Farsight was absent during a Tyranid invasion, he stepped up and led the Enclaves until Farsight came back, where he graciously stepped down from command willingly despite having every right to maintain it. What's also funny is that he just has a shit ton of anti-infantry guns on him because I guess Ira Khan is like me and he saw War Machine and Iron Man 2 and it just spoke to him on a spiritual level. Lastly, everybody's favorite anime protagonist, Sub-Commander Torchstar, who has some very interesting fan art made of her thanks to the crossover between Tau fans and anime fans. Let me go ahead and read her description because it's rather thorough for some reason compared to all the Tau. Torchstar is noted to have fire tattoos across her body and often wears her pilot suit without sleeves to show off the tattoos. She is shorter and more thickest than most members of the Firecast. Torchstar wears her auburn hair in a long braid with 3 metal rings to symbolize her greatest victories. She's literally a Gundam character, I swear to God. Continuing on with what makes her into a Gundam character, she is the youngest member of the Aid, being an actual defector of the Tau than someone who joined Farsight in exile at the start. She is very funny. She pilots a battlesuit despite having claustrophobia. She has a very dark sense of humor despite her age, to the point where the other members of the Eight find it very surprising, but it also lightens the mood in battle. She sees Commander Farsight as her literal Isle and is so incredibly headstrong that she will ignore advice when she's made up her mind. Also, she has covered her battlesuit in so many flamers that she ended up modifying all the flamers so that way they could be carried by hand if she ever needs to hop out the suit and fight. She also fucking hates humans, probably because of the Imperium, and she's a boxer. Torchstar is a boxer. So there's your ill-tempered tsundere alien tomboy for all of those who think 40k need more anime influences, I guess. I'm already over time with this damn script and I need to edit it. I don't know if I gave enough insight on the Tau, honestly, and that's just because it ended up becoming Farsight Enclave Glazed at the end. But honestly, I think that's for the best. The Tau were a cool and interesting faction that didn't need to rely on the same cruelties as the Imperium, but because of neckbeard perception, they ended up getting changed to be overly evil to fit in 40k. But somebody had a brain and decided, hey, let's make an entire Tau sept of just good people. Flawed, but they're trying their best to uphold the greater good for what it actually means. The Tau characters can be divisive, hell, the Tau by themselves are divisive, but I kind of look at them in the same way as Imperial Guard, and I just really hate the hypocrisy of the hatred for them. There's so many people who love the Guard, but they hate the Tau because the Tau are a shooting army with some tricks, as if the Guard don't have an over-reliance on artillery bullshit and also just incredibly durable, cheap tanks. I find it really hard to hate on the little guys who are trying to do their best in a galaxy that hates them. So you know what? I like the Tau, and I might make them an army one day. Who knows? But I do know this. In 40k, there is room for good guys. You just gotta be willing to remember that hope is an integral part of Grimdark. Hope is what drives people. A quote from Commander Peertide: "There are certain things in war of which the Firecast commander alone comprehends the importance. It is not his right, but rather his responsibility to send thousands to their deaths if millions will prevail. That is the heaviest burden of command, and it must be shouldered alone." Thanks for listening. I feel like there was a bunch of stuff I forgot to talk about the Tau. Recording this right now as I'm looking at it, this is about 38 minutes long to 39 minutes, so got my work cut out for me. This might be a really poorly edited one this time around. Heavy quotations, poorly edited. Probably less jokes. Feels good to get them done though. I feel like there's room for a Farsight Enclave video down the road, but you know, that's the part of Tau that I like. Anyways, a big ol' thank you to these fine folks, that being, where are your names? Sethane, Hylor Kruber, That Guy, Unfurled Dread, St. Gonk, Mount Papa 11, Crimson, Lone, CB Drawer 95. I say CB Drawer, but it's CB Drawer. He used to draw. I don't know why I keep doing that. The Hog, Joe Oster, and Felicia, Josh from Allstate, Balding Dragon 62, Regular Alley, Suspendor, Javier Soto, Matt the Jam Man, Overdraft Perfection, Envy, The Coffee Addict, Zachary White, The God Emperor of Art, Alexander McCabe, Ritz, Arctic Berserker, Omidium, and Captain Bubbles. And a big ol' thank you to these fine folks. I think there's some new people here, actually. Mecha Boy, Happy Joy, make a fat PO box, man. I am not doing that just because you are the one who's asking. I am good, big dog. The Great Sword Cowboy, Sartin 065, Diomedes 22, Divine Backhand, Navis Omicron, Jokimitsu 45, Celtic, Human Spirit Indomitus, John Papa John, Icico 11, Breezy Axeman, Commander Apo CC 1119, Solace in the Void, Nameless School Ease, Never Lost Man, Gap G, Dism, Felix, Up, Down, Left, Right, Istra, and Ape Brain Esquire. Imperium again, I think, is where we're going. Don't have a lot of Imperium options left, if any, actually, now I'm thinking about it. might do a bullshit video. But I've also been listening to the Payday soundtrack recently, and I had an idea. See you later.